Greetings everyone. My name is Dr. Lokita Maka, and in this particular video we'll be discussing grazing ecology and sustainable pasture management. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe. I beg you. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. Thank you so much for the love. Thank you for the support. Please do like the video, share with other people, and make sure you do watch those ads, guys. The minute the adverts pop up, just watch them. It actually helps a lot. It helps us to grow this channel, and it also helps us to actually expand, Anyway, as I have mentioned, that we will be discussing grazing ecology. So we're going to look at pastures, both artificial and natural pastures, optimum grazing, the types of velds in South Africa, and just basically the characteristics of grazing plants. Right, now let's get to it without wasting time. So why grazing ecology? Why are we talking about this? Now remember, on one of the videos I mentioned that the minute you see logy, the suffix logy, it tells you that that is the study of something, right? Now this is what is happening even here. And now we've got new term, which is grazing, but also I mentioned a pasture. So now when it comes to grazing ecology, this is something, these are two terms that you need to understand clearly. What are pastures? What is to graze, right? So now with animals, we don't say animals are eating. So animals either graze or browse, right? So those that will browse on trees, or will browse on shrubs, right? But those that will graze on pastures. Now these are grasses, right? But anyway, we're gonna elaborate more on that. So if we're talking about now grazing ecology, now my understanding is that already we had discussed what ecology is. You understand, you know ecology by head. But now grazing ecology, what does that mean? Now this is the interaction and also the interrelationships between now the soil, the plants, as well as the animals. Right? And why grazing ecology? Someone is going to ask, why are we studying grazing ecology? So basically, the aim of this concept of grazing ecology is to actually have a look at the ecosystem, study the ecosystem, and show that there is a balance of the various factors, be it's the soil, it's the plants, it's the animals during farming, right? And now this healthy balance actually makes it possible for grazing to take place in a sustainable way. So if you study the ecosystem, right, if you ensure that grazing ecology is done up to a good standard, it will ensure that your pastures are sustainable, and you will be able to control how many animals feed on this particular area, right? And now if the natural pastures, for example, are now getting depleted, it might then lead to you to actually plant the artificial pastures. Right now, what is a pasture, or what are pastures? Right now, when we're talking about pastures, we are basically talking about the land that is covered with the vegetation. Now this vegetation is used for grazing livestock, which are part of the farm, right? So this can be grasses, this can be forbs, this can be legumes, and all type of pastures, right? So these can either be cultivated by men or naturally occur in that particular area. So when we're talking about pastures, we are talking about the source of food for grazing animals. So it's not only used by the domestic animals, but it can also be used by the wild animals. In most cases, for wild animals, because we don't keep wild animals, then they will use natural pastures. Now, if you look at this picture on this video, there are two types of grasses, right? The other one is very green, and the other one is, yes, it's also green, but it's not as green as that one. Now, in most cases, between a natural and artificial pastures, this is the case. Now, what is the difference? Now, with natural pastures, if you look on your right hand, the right picture, the picture on the right, yes. Now, this looks more like a natural pasture. Now, when we're talking of natural pastures, these are grasses or pastures that occur without direct human intervention. Right, they can be developed over time, and they are basically shaped by climate, the soil conditions of that area, the interactions between plants and animals in that particular area. Right, and now the natural pastures will often basically support a diverse range of plant species, which will then create a balanced and resilient ecosystem. Right, then on the left hand side, we've got artificial pastures. Now, these are the kind of pastures that are cultivated by men or humans, or improved pastures, right? So there is a human intervention in this case, right? Now, they can involve a farmer deliberately planting or managing specific grasses and legumes so that these the animals can actually graze on them. So now, with artificial pastures, guys, management is very important. They need to be managed. They need to be controlled, right? There needs to be an intensive grazing system that can control the ecosystem, that can control the pastures, so that to ensure sustainability in a way. Now, there are a lot of factors that influence the grazing ecology, right? Now, what you need to take note is a pasture is an ecosystem on its own. And why? Remember, there are both abiotic factors there and biotic factors, right? So there is an interaction, right, of those living things and non-living things in that particular environment. So there are several things that we're going to look at, and one of them is ecological succession. Now, what is ecological succession? So if you look at the first picture here, that is a typical example of an ecological succession. Right, now I want us to actually have a look at this. I want us to understand what is meant now by ecological succession. So basically, when we're talking about plant succession or ecological succession, this is the same thing. Someone will say plant succession, someone will say ecological succession, right? Now, this is basically a process of change, right, in the species that make up that ecological community over time. As you can see here, there's an arrow. So now we have exposed rocks, we have lichens and mosses, then it moves to annual weeds, then it moves to perennial weeds and grasses, then it moves to shrubs, it moves to young pine forest, it also then moved to beech and maple broadleaf forest. Right, so basically, what will happen, right, is with the interaction of the vegetation over time, like when the animals interact with the vegetation over time, there will be changes, right? And now these changes will then regulate the balance now in this particular ecosystem, right? And then there will be changes now over time. As you can see in this picture, right? But now that is not the only thing that we're going to talk about, there also now an adaptation of the adaptations to grazing. How do animals adapt now to grazing? So how do animals now graze? There are various ways. There is what we call selective grazing. Now, with selective grazing, basically, a selective grazer is any animal that is able to aim for and get that particular plant. So if I say, no, I don't want this particular plant, I'm going to graze on this one, you are selective, right? So this basically happens if animals are given that freedom. They are allowed to choose what they will graze in, as you can see on the third picture here, right? They can move from one point to another. Most animals now will actually use or will graze what we call palatable plants, right? Now that is another term that you need to write down. When you say something is palatable, then it's actually nicer to eat, right? So even animals, they have those choices, guys, but sometimes it's not really a choice. Then they would have to actually even go for the unpalatable plants, right? Now, but in most cases, if there are in a palatable area or in a grazing area, there is both palatable and non-palatable. Now, remember I said when we're talking about palatable, this is more pleasant to eat, nicer to eat, right? So in most cases, what will happen is if in a selective grazing area, the animals will actually overgraze. They will graze more on the palatable species than unpalatable or non-palatable ones, right? And then there is also non-selective grazing. Now, in a case of non-selective grazing, this is where the animals eat any type of plant, right? Whether it's non-palatable or palatable, they don't have as much freedom as selective grazing. And then there is zero grazing, right? Now, with zero grazing, as you can see on this particular, on the last picture there, on zero grazing, this is basically a feedlot system, right? And these are actually becoming popular now, especially in like farms where they want to control the livestock. So what will happen is they're going to keep them in different structures. They're going to keep the animals in different structures and then provide the feed for them. So they don't have a choice of choose. They just graze on what they are given, right? Now, what is most important to note on this particular system is that this is actually, it requires money. There are high capital inputs there, and it's also labor, guys, because you have to actually feed the animals yourself. Then we've got what we call optimal grazing, right? Now, you know what I like with agriculture is that if you just need to understand the English words, then everything makes sense. You can be able to define what you asked. Now, if you're talking about optimal grazing, now this is making the best use of the available pasture, right? Now, how do you ensure that you use what is available to you to the best of your ability as a farmer, right? Now, for optimal grazing, you actually basically need to consider two things: the grazing capacity or carrying capacity, as well as the stocking rate. Now, what is the grazing capacity, right? Now, the grazing capacity is basically how many animals your pasture can support in a period of time, right? So now what happens here is the area now that is required to maintain these animals over this period of years without actually deteriorating the vegetation or soil is basically called the grazing capacity. Now this can vary from one area to another, and it's dependent on various factors. These factors can be rain, it can be the veld condition, it can be the slope, it can be aspect, or it can even be soil, right? So the production of forage is very important to consider, right? It actually determines the grazing capacity, the utilization rate, how often do these animals utilize the pastures, right? The daily intake as well, and also the length of the grazing season. So it can fluctuate. Then we have the stocking rate. Now, the stocking rate is actually more dynamic. It's more of a dynamic metric, right? Now, when we're talking about stocking rate, this is basically defined as the number of animals of a particular class, right, per unit area of a land over a specific period of time. So they also fluctuate with weather conditions, and also some of the factors that influence the stocking rates would be the management, would be weather, will be the plants, will also be the forage intake. Now let's look at the different types of velds in South Africa. Like, guys, this is my favorite. Let's look at the different types. Now I've drawn a very simple graph table here. So we've got 3 different types. We've got the sweet veld, we've got the sour veld, we've got the mixed veld. Now what is important for you with each of these veld is to understand the type of climate in that particular veld, the soil characteristics, as well as the plant characteristics, those 3. Now if we talk of sweet veld, it was mnandi. This kind of veld actually occurs in a warm temperatures with the low rainfall that have no frost. So that is the climate. But in terms of soil, now the soil, because there's less rainfall in that particular area, then it means the soil does not get washed away, and it remains nutritious, right? Now, because the soil does not get washed away and remains nutritious, then it means the plants there are palatable and nutritious, so they can be used all year round. You see, these connect to one another. Then we have the sour veld. Now, sour veld actually occur in an area where there is high rainfall. So you can imagine when there is high rainfall and moderate summer temperatures, very cold winters with frost, what does that do? To the plants. If it has a detrimental effect to human beings, what does it do now to the plants? Now, what does this mean? It means that the nutrients in the soil are washed out, right? There is the soil is less nutritious, and also the soil is acidic. Right, now what does this mean if the soil is less nutritious? It means that now the plants will store the nutrients in the roots during winter. Now this leaves the leaves less palatable and less nutritious, right? Then sour veld can only be used in summer when there are higher temperatures, right? Then we've got a mixed veld. Now this is the combination of both sweet and sour, right? In areas where there is higher rainfall but lower temperatures, right? So the soil here is less acidic but more nutritious than sour veld, and also the leaves are more palatable than those in sour veld, and the veld needs actually to be looked very carefully for grazing. Right, now let's look at the different characteristics of grazing plants. We are almost done, guys. So we've got the nutritive value of grazing plants, we've got mixed veld dynamics, the resistance to grazing and ecological status, we've got pasture condition scoring, and also the indicators of veld conditions. However, there are challenges in grazing ecology. Some of these challenges include undergrazing, overgrazing, invasive species, seasonal variability, the ecological succession, climate change, and so on and so forth. We also have the diseases that can be transmitted from one plant to another. The health of the soil, erosion can be one of those challenges. Otherwise, that's it from me. Thank you very much, grade 10s. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a thumbs up, share with other people, share with your classmates, share with your teacher as well, and just practice this, or just go over this over and over again. You can pause anytime you want. You can write the notes down if you want to, and then I'll see you on the next video for grade 10, where we will be discussing pasture and veld management. This should be work for week 4, if I am not mistaken. Yes, veld and pasture management. So this should be week 4. So anyway, I hope you are enjoying agricultural sciences so far, and yeah man, see you next time.